Hi everyone, this is Raymond's Wood at the Raymond's Wood podcast. A big thank you again for everyone tuning in. Now, most recently, we run an event down in Sydney and Newcastle, and I met our next guest, Tsiattalos, and we had the most interesting conversation at the end of one of our events that we run. The event that we run is called the Professional Player Pathway, and it's not where we search for talented players, but it's where we teach families and players on our 4-year program on how we can develop their son or daughter into the next superstar. When I actually spoke to Chris said he wished he had a program like this when he was younger. And straight away I thought Chris would be great to bring onto the podcast to tell us about his experiences growing up in Australia and playing football, and what this would have meant to Chris growing up when he was younger to have something like the Professional Player Pathway. So I'll introduce you to Tsiattalos. How are you, Chris?
I'm good, thanks. For yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. So thank you for joining us. So obviously, we only met for the first time a couple of weeks ago at one of our events. And before we talk about that event and we get into it, I think we'll just have a little bit of an intro into your background and where firstly you started your love of football. So how old was you when you first kicked the ball, and who was the team that you first supported?
The first game I ever watched was Italy-Brazil World Cup, USA. I was in kindergarten at the time.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much my granddad let me stay home to watch the game before I went to school. And that's where my love pretty much started from there.
Amazing. And do you have a club team that you've followed since you've been growing up in particular?
Yes.
Or
So when I learned a little bit more about the game, I think it was probably about year 3. When I started at a new school, all the boys at school all had a team. The majority of them had Man United. And I decided to go for Liverpool. There was myself and 2 other guys. And just been Liverpool ever since.
I won't argue with on that one.
Yeah.
That's a good team to support. I don't mind Liverpool myself. So you were an 80s child growing up in Australia. So how did you first get involved in playing football? It was just something that mum and dad took you along to, or how did you? What are your first memories of playing sort of club football?
Yeah, so playing club football, it was just a bunch of boys in kindergarten to year 2. We used to pretty much play every lunchtime at school. And it went from there. My mum and my grandparents pretty much took me to all the games. I started playing for a local club and just, fell in love with the game and just wanted to play every minute I could. Finish school, play, go to someone's house and just play. That's all we did.
So from a young age, obviously, we had to note that from the age of under 11 and under 12s, you were actually playing sort of state league football. So that's obviously, for most nowadays, that's your version of NPL or SAP football.
Correct.
Do you think the level was pretty high going back when you were playing in the 90s then?
I think it was. Around those times, I remember there was only 2 divisions in under 11s and under 12s, and it involved almost like 20 teams. So as a comparison, you would compare it to like the English Premier League kind of style, where there wasn't a whole lot of leagues, but it was just full of talent. Under 11s and under 12s, it was hard to get into a team. And we went for, like, as a Sydney-based team, you went from the Central Coast down to Wollongong and all the way out to Bathurst. So there was a large area to cover for not a whole bunch of teams.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah.
It's just such an isolated area sometimes. I think the size of the country, that's one of the things that I've discovered in the 18 years of living in Australia. It's so far wide and spread. It's definitely I wouldn't say it's a problem, but I'd say it's a hurdle that you've got to try and combat and come over. And we'll touch on it in a little bit when we obviously talk a little bit about the Professional Player Pathway. So do you recall sort of at a particular age, and what was the driving motivators when you started to think, actually, I wouldn't mind making a crack at becoming a professional football player?
I was very young at the time, probably 13, 14, when we started trying to push into it was the change from cadets to a youth league. And from that point in time, that was my goal, to be a professional footballer.
And what age, not what age, but what were the amount of hours you think you were doing at 13 and 14 for your training?
So training was always 2 to 3 nights a week. and I would always compare notes with my friends at school, and we'd always get like additional training programs from other coaches from other teams. So if my mates were in one team and they got a coaching program, I'd do that. So I'd be training 5 days a week, just doing extra for myself. But being part of a club, it was always, 2 nights, sometimes 3 nights a week.
So very, very committed to getting out and doing those extra hours.
Yeah. Practice makes perfect. That's what I was told. So, yeah.
That's great. So when you look back at your playing journey through Australia, was there a particular coach that stuck out who you really liked as a coach? And what were the one or two things that stuck out to you as a young player playing the game that motivated you to play for the coach?
Good question. I think probably when I was in my 20s, and it was playing in like the local Wollongong League. It was where I'd heard the majority of ex-NSL players were playing.
Yeah.
If I can remember one, it's probably a coach, one of the best coaches that you have is probably the one that you hate the most. And I think like it's mainly because they push you. I think his name was Norm Boardman. I think he's been involved in Football New South Wales a fair bit as well. I did learn a whole lot from him. We'd only train 2 nights a week, but they were long training sessions. And I picked up quite a fair bit, just learning how to be precise with your passes. If someone's making a run and they're available, they have to be played, which was something that I used to do. I was playing on the wing when I was playing with him. If I made a run and somebody didn't play me the ball, the whole team was punished. So you need to learn to open your eyes and have a look and see if someone's making that run and they're in a better position than you have to give them that opportunity. So
yeah,
that's probably what I learned the most.
It's a great and invaluable lesson that I've learned over the years and 25 years of coaching, but it's a great lesson as well, I think, for the young Australians watching this podcast, is that probably the coaches, or even like if we think about school and the teachers that they don't particularly like in school, hopefully they'll actually realise that there's a reason why they don't like them, is because they're actually pushing them in the direction they need to go. And I think that's a sign of a great coach, as long as it's pushing in that right direction. That's going to sort of help a little bit with the developments, and it's good that you've got that memory and that feedback. So one of the things I did want to touch on, so roll on, Sana, get out of Australia, and one of the interesting facts that I read about you, and I'd love you to talk a little bit more in detail about this, and I'm sure some of our players and parents will see it as an ingenious moment, and you'll probably know what I'm getting to, but was when you pretended to be a football agent to get trials. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Wasn't sure if you'd want to hear about this, but
100%.
I was hungry. I was very hungry as a kid. And that was probably along when I was 18, 19, 20. I just said, I'm just going to take it upon myself. I had connections initially through another guy I used to work with. He was a boxing trainer at the time. And he had family over in Italy who were connected with a couple of clubs. So he mentioned to me, when you're ready, we'll go. And so he had originally connected Regina at the time. They were in the Serie A.
Yeah.
Palermo and Parma. There was a bit of a mention with Brescia as well. So they weren't the biggest clubs, but they were up there at the time. So that was early 2000s, around 2005, 6, 7, around that sort of time. And then I broke my ankle before that. So I spent a fair bit of time just doing that rehab. And then that's when he approached me and said, let's do it. And then once he had organized those trials, I broke my knee. I had a knee reconstruction. And then after that, I just decided, we lost a bit of touch from that point, and I just decided I'm just going to do it myself. I would get on the phone and I would just call. I started calling like lower level clubs, like English League 1, English League 2. Spoke with the gaffer at Oldham, I remember. I don't remember his name. It was a long time ago, but I waited on the phone and they said, yeah, he's coming off the pitch now. And I just pretended to be a football scout. A scout / manager. So I told him I was managing 2 players that were in Australia, myself and one of my best friends. who we still talk on a daily basis, and he was a winger. And I mentioned to them, and any coach that I spoke to, this goes along with, so we had set up trials. I had set up trials with Oldham, Nottingham Forest. Who was the other club? Off the top of my head, I remember LA Galaxy in the USA.
Was it I think you mentioned the Bristol
Sheffield.
clubs. Was it Bristol City or Bristol Rovers?
Sheffield and Bristol. Bristol was through a connection through someone who used to come to the gym. I used to be a personal trainer at the gym, and he linked me with the right name, and I just called up and said, look, I'm looking for such and such. And it was Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, both those clubs. And he was going to help me get there as well. So we'd set up those trials, and I'd also set up ones for America, particularly LA Galaxy, New York Red Bulls, and San Jose Earthquakes. But the conversation that I had with LA Galaxy, I'm not sure they're going to want to hear this, but when I had spoken with them, and pretty much any club, I just mentioned the kind of players that we were. They asked me for video footage, but I didn't have any at the time. So I just said, look, these players aren't going to come halfway across the world for nothing. They had given us the opportunity to come to an open trial at LA Galaxy. And I just said, look, these players need a private trial. They're coming halfway around the world, and it's going to be worth your while. They're already going to a couple of MLS clubs already, and I think they'd be perfect for your club. And they were ready to go. So they just said, okay, these are the dates. Give us a call when you're here, and we'll organise the trial.
What year would that have been around, roughly?
That was when David Beckham had just gone there.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the only reason I really knew about LA Galaxy, because David Beckham had just gone there.
Because David Beckham had gone there. And in regards to, I mean, I think it shows a dedication and how much you love football. And I know even nowadays, it's not that easy to get trials because you've got to go through so many hurdles and hoops, but we'll explain in a little bit later on in the episode how you discovered us and how we help players get through those hurdles or over those hurdles. But how successful were you in getting trials with any of them? Did you manage to make any trials with any of the clubs?
So I was ready to leave. I had set up the trials, like I've received the date and the number of who to call and when to call them. But unfortunately, so that was going to be in the January, like sort of around the January era. And in December, I had my appendix out, so everything was just put on hold.
It was put on hold.
Yeah, I was devastated. Like what can you do? Body had shut down. So,
and you're obviously doing that for the simple reason you felt at the time there wasn't anyone who you could really connect to, or who could connect you to the pathway to making it as a professional. And as you said, when you met us in the room a few weeks ago at our event in Sydney, you said if this would have been here 15, 20 years ago, it would have been the best thing ever.
100%, yeah.
And that was, sorry, go ahead, go on.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, like, I remember at the time I'd also called a whole bunch of agencies, like player agents in New South Wales, Googling them, trying to find out who was who. No one could really say what they could offer. They would just like sign up, pay some money, and we'll manage you. But there was no sort of anyone ready to look for some talent. And that's why I just took it upon myself.
Yeah. No, that's good. Guys, we're just about to go to a break at the Raymond Wood podcast, but before we go to an advert, we're going to ask everyone, we've got a huge competition on for the whole of 2024. We're asking everyone if you like, comment and share our podcast. And in December 2024, we're actually going to be giving away one lucky player, boy or girl, in Australia, an opportunity to join me and the team at Euro Football Star to receive a full scholarship worth $50,000 to come on the professional player pathway. Guys, enjoy the ad break and we'll be back with you in a couple of minutes.
Would you one day like to be a professional football player? Would you like to be part of our pro player pathway? What is the pro player pathway? It's an opportunity for all Australian football players aged between 10 and 23 who want to join us to become the next professional football player. On the pro player pathway, you get to join me and my team free of charge to an event all around Australia. When you join me, we're going to teach you the secrets of football in Europe. And one day, maybe, you could be gracing the Champions League final. Guys, over the next 12 months, we're going to be coming around all the major cities of Australia. And when we come around all the major cities, we're going to be running our free events everywhere we go. So guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's a free event. It's for boys and girls aged 10 to 23. And I'm going to teach you the secrets of becoming a top European football player. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to be giving away 20 scholarships to join me on this program of a lifetime.
Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood for the next part of our podcast episode. We're here with Chris Tsiattalos, and we were just discussing about Chris felt like when he was younger, he had nowhere to go as a player. He had no direction. He had no real agent to reach out to try and pursue his career as a professional football player. Before we move on to a little bit of how me and Chris connected a few weeks ago, and we'll go into a little bit of detail of that. We're just following on from your story, Chris. So also, you mentioned a little bit, and I'd love you to build on for our listeners a little bit about the link between Cyprus and Liverpool Football Club and what that was exactly.
Yeah, so it just so happened, like I was on a holiday with my family, and always just wanted to be involved. I had tried to obviously set up trials in Cyprus as well before I was injured. That was before I did my knee reconstruction, and while I was there, I just took the opportunity. I looked up something and something came up. It was Liverpool Football Academy that they were running. I think they run a few worldwide. And I just made touch, spoke with a player there was a player coach that was there. And I was a strength and conditioning coach at the time in Australia. So I just thought I'd try my luck. And he invited me to a training session. I helped out. I gave a few pointers. And he kept me on board for a few weeks. Just to sort of help out and try and get involved with the club. And unfortunately, like I didn't plan on staying in Cyprus, so I ran out of time, and I just thought, look, I'll probably come home. For me, it wasn't going to be enough to sort of get by. I would have had to start looking for work in Cyprus at the time. So I wouldn't be able to sustain myself there. But yeah, there was an opportunity. Liverpool Football Club had an academy set up, and yeah, it was looking promising at the time.
Yeah, it's good. It's such a hotbed of talent, and people don't realise it's actually a really good stepping stone for pro players to go and play in Cyprus. I've visited Cyprus many, many times, and it's amazing to actually hear an Australian who actually knows where Cyprus is and what it is. But I've spent many a times in Larnaca, Pretoria, Tsiattalos. I've been there many, many times. But the Cyprus League is a really good in for a lot of pros who want to get in. And we were just speaking about it on one of our YouTube episodes a few days ago. And I think you were privy to it, Chris, at the event that we talk about the 1% and only 1% make it as a player. Yeah. But when you actually look at the 1% in more detail, there's actually 130,000 football players professionally all around the world. So when you look at it that way, rather than saying you've got to get inside the 1%, you've actually just got to get inside the 130,000. And if you do, you're a professional. And there's been a lot of players who've made a career playing in Cyprus, Greece, Turkey, and then gone on to bigger leagues. And just for our listeners, you'll probably be privy to it, Chris, but for anyone who's not aware of Cyprus, it's an island in the Mediterranean, and it's split between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. Yeah. And the football, I mean, Chris, I'll let you explain it a little bit and how you discovered Cyprus as well, but the passion of football in Cyprus is huge, eh?
It is. It's very huge. So my family's from the Greek side of Cyprus, so I've got family in Cyprus. But the talent that is there, I mean, all across Europe, it's second to none. Like they live for football, and one of those sort of, I guess, the scenarios about Cyprus, if you want to compare or you want to sort of see if you're not aware of them, you can look up Apoel. I think they had probably one of the best Champions League runs couple of years back, playing against Real Madrid. So there is definitely an in for these sort of clubs in terms of entering Champions League football and getting spotted. So you don't always have to play for the biggest clubs in the world. Some of the smaller clubs always get an opportunity to play in Europa League and Champions League, and some of them surprise some of the big names.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, again, you would have listened to it in our talk last week, but we say there's a lot of people out there touting opportunities for players and the promising Manchester City and promising Liverpool. Yeah. And although we can do that, if the right player's in the right situation and at the right development point, but also there's no shame in going to play in the top division in Cyprus or Greece or whatever it may be, because once you've got your foot inside the top 130,000 group of professional players, the only way you can go is upwards if you're working hard. And I mean, there's many players who've had great runs in the Champions League with Cypriot teams, Greek teams, Turkish teams, and then have gone on to bigger and better things. So it's quite funny that you knew at such an early age there wasn't much of an opportunity for you. There wasn't anyone to help you. So it was like either I give up or I actually try and pretend to become an agent myself. And it just shows you. And I think, to be honest, it's a lot for players nowadays. You've only got two options in my eyes. And this was the complaints department that we looked in within Australia, but also not just in Australia, in places like the USA and other big countries, is that there's the opportunity like you've done where you could call up and pretend to be an agent, but that's getting harder now with technology and things like Google and the internet, because people are going to search you up. And the only other option is if you pay a premium. And this is the whole reason we set up the professional player pathways, because people are paying a premium $10,000 to $15,000 for the trial. It doesn't lead to anything. They get upset, and 9 times out of 10 they fall out of the game. And it's a big loss. Is that how you see it, Chris? That there's still not too much out there that offers any sort of pathway?
I think there's a lot of magic dust out there. When I say magic dust, like you'll show someone a bit of magic formula to say this is what's going to happen, and it's happening to a lot of people in the youth competitions. A lot of my friends have sons that are playing in the youth competitions, and they're being told, they have to pay extra for SAP or a SAP academy. And if they're not paying extra and they're not coming to those extra nights, and they're not playing on the weekends, and then they're promising them the world. Some of them are paying $20,000 a year to be taken overseas, as part of a team effort to compete against clubs overseas, but nothing ever comes from it. Yeah, there's no guarantee. It's just to be shown. You don't know who's looking. So, and at the end of the day, I think, unfortunately, it's just come down. It's become more of just a money-making kind of scheme, and you're not looking out for the player's best interest, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it, about the 7 pillars of the professional player pathway, and we've touched on it in previous podcasts, but we will go into that little bit of detail around the trial elements and the why we added into the program. So it's actually part of the program, and we don't actually charge anything for it. And it's such an important part for us, because we actually understand as well, we're realistic that it might take parents 2 or 3 goes to get their son or daughter across and to actually open up that opportunity. And also, is that actually an opportunity that they really, really want? And that's one of the things that we do at Euro Football Star. We offer tours, but the tours that we offer overseas, they are exactly what they say they are on a can. It's an opportunity to touch, see and feel, go to Premier League games, go and watch top level training sessions going on, be part of some professional training sessions with academy coaches. But there's absolutely no promise on those tours that anyone's getting anything from that. It is a tour, and that's simply what it is. Yeah. The other side of it, the business, is the professional player pathway, which we'll touch on to in our next little episode when we get back after the next ad break. But that was one of the things and the whole reason why we set it up. I think for me, I think for the clubs, in protection of the clubs as well, it's hard, and it's a lot of the clubs are volunteer run and led. And for me, I think that's where a lot of the problems happen at clublands, because you've got parents paying anything in the region of $2,000 to $5,000 a year for football at SAP and NPL. 9 times out of 10, it's being administered by volunteers, it's being run by volunteers, and a lot of the times the coaches, and I know what the coaches earn, the coaches aren't on a lot of money, so unfortunately they're not actually running at this as a job full time. A lot of them have other jobs outside of coaching, so it's destined to fail. And I think it's expectations. I think from the FFA level and the state level, I think they need to come out and say, you need to understand as parents that firstly, to make it as a professional football player, if we think of it as a pie and it's 100% full, club is only going to contribute to 30, maybe 35% of whether you're going to make it or not. And for that $2,000 to $4,000 you're going to spend, that's only going to cover 30% of your development. The other 70% is what you do as a family or as a player outside of club, the extra sessions you're doing. But again, one of the biggest problems we've got, which you're probably privy to as well, Chris, and we spoke about it last week, is the cost involved in them filling that other 70%. And is that something that you see as well? That's a major problem.
It is a major problem because a lot of the clubs now are being linked with additional academies, which is the word that's I've heard from a lot of my friends who have their kids involved in youth league MPL levels. And unfortunately, if you're not part of those sort of academies, and those academies are run by ex-players, I'm not going to step and say that they're all, not good or anything like that. I've not watched them, I've not met them. I'm just saying that in terms of having an academy that could promise you the world, it's probably not going to be fair. And if you're going to have a lot of people that can't afford it, it's probably just, it hurts the player, because if a player is great, but they can't afford to be part of that club or that academy, then they're hurt as well. Like they don't get the opportunity or a fair go. So I think clubs need to be aware of that as well. It can't all just be in the best interest of business. But yeah, in terms of a pathway at, NPL level, I've not seen a pathway ever since I was playing. There's no direct pathway for a great player to be seen. I've seen so many great players that, in my opinion, would have made the Australian squad, no doubt, and been playing overseas, but just gave up because there was no opportunity. So
I think you're spot on. They spent a lot of time, and we spoke about this briefly last week, but they tried to fix a wheel in my eyes that was never broken. And they should have really been looking at the pathway out of Australia to understand and recognise and be honest and hold your hands up and go, okay, why is it that 100% of the Matildas and the Socceroos all ply the trade elsewhere overseas? And it's quite simple. It's because the leagues are a higher quality and a higher level. And that's where all the best players are. And that's where development happens. It's not the coaches. The coaches is only the 10%, the icing on the cake. It's the environment that you're in on a daily basis. And those Australian players, the Matildas and Socceroos, they're so good because they're in the best environment. I think we looked at it. I think it's 72% of the Matildas and Socceroos play in Europe, of which I think 52% of them play in England in the WSL and the EPL and the English divisions of football. So I think firstly the FFA, I think, need to have a look at that. I admit as an Australian, you don't want players to go overseas. Ideally, in an ideal world, they stay here and play Women's A-League and play A-League. But we all know if we want to have the best Socceroos and the best Matildas, it's not going to produce the best players. But I think once they identify that and have a clear pathway and actually look at it as a model and go, well, we're going to do all the really amazing work with them up until they're 14, 15 and 16. And eventually, hopefully, we will have a league maybe one day that could rival one of the European leagues. But for now, I think they actually need to be honest and say, this is the pathway if you're an elite player and this is how you get on it. And you've hit the nail on the head. They've never identified it because they don't want to admit, I think, that the pathway is actually leaving Australia once you get to a certain age. It's different for boys, it's different for girls. I believe in my eyes, girls can stay in Australia a lot longer because they can play boys football to a certain age. They can play up age groups a lot easier. With the boys, for me, I think they've got to be gone by the time they're 13 or 14. Otherwise, they're just too far behind everyone else in Europe.
And you did touch on that during the seminar that I came to speak to you about, or I spoke to you at the seminar. But you only have to look at some of the most famous names. Harry Kewell, Tim Cahill, even Aaron Moy. At 16 years old, they weren't playing football in Australia anymore.
No.
And they were taken overseas because they had the talent, and they knew that they couldn't grow their game anymore here.
Yeah.
And that's just proof. So.
Yeah, no, it is. So, guys, we're just going to go to our final ad break. Thank you for listening in so far. And what we're going to do is, guys, again, we're just going to ask everyone, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast channel. We are going to be giving away a $50,000 scholarship to join us on the professional player pathway for one lucky boy or girl in December 2024. We'll be back with you very soon.
Hey everyone, we are coming around every major city in Australia over the next 12 months. We have got free objective football testing going on, guys. It's for boys and girls aged 10 all the way through to 18 years of age. The objective testing is quite simple. We'll put you through our 6 tests and then give you your results: physical, technical and tactical. And also, we're going to choose 16 winners to join us on an all expenses paid trip to Europe in 2024 and also 2025. Guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free to sign up. You get free objective testing and you'll get a free feedback, and maybe you'll be joining me at the Santiago Bernabeu in 2024 or 25.
Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood. We're back for our final section with Chris Tsiattalos, and we were just speaking a little bit about opportunities and the professional player pathway. So I'm going to explain a little bit now how I first met Chris. So I met Chris in an event we run all around the world called the Professional Player Pathway. For those guys who aren't aware of what it is, it's a very unique niche 4-year program where we work remotely based with players to identify a pathway for boys and girls from the ages of 8 to 23. And during the program and the 4-year journey, you actually have 7 pillars to the program. And Chris was very good and kind to come out and watch the event and the seminar and to gather some information. And we had an amazing conversation, only brief at the end, and hence why we brought Chris on, because the first words he said to me was, when I met with him, I wish this would have been around when I was younger. And it really put a smile on my face, because the whole reason we run this professional player pathway is to basically help players and kids in the game like Chris Tsiattalos, who don't want to have to pick up a phone and pretend to be an agent and don't want to feel like they've got nowhere else to go. They've actually got an opportunity. So Chris, when you joined us on the professional player pathway, just for everyone listening, how did you first find out about the event and what intrigued you to come along?
So I first saw the details about the event through social media. It just kept popping up, and then I thought, okay, I'm intrigued. And then I was actually planning to come to Newcastle to watch the training sessions. But then when I called up, or when I spoke to your assistant, I was just mentioned to come down to Parramatta. It was closer for me at the time. My goal was only just to have a chat with you, I guess, as well, and just see what you're offering. So it was perfect just to see that at the seminar anyway.
No, yeah, brilliant. So when you were watching the event play out and roll out and the information we were given, we spoke about like the 7 different pillars of the program, and the way it's really geared around actually developing you over a 4-year period to then make sure when you go across for your opportunity, it's going to give you the best chance of being successful. What was probably the one big thing that stuck out to you, maybe out of the 7 pillars? What was one of the pillars that really stuck out to you?
Look, hard to say just one. It was more along the lines of what you're offering in terms of what you specifically are offering. Being that you were a scout for Liverpool, for Leicester, for PSG, having that sort of advice that can be given directly from a scout to play professionally versus just any everyday coach that can't really contribute as much as what they would like to. Hearing it directly from someone who knows what they're looking for in a player and how you can help the players would have been ideal for myself. And I think any player that's looking to go professional. So I wouldn't be able to name just like one pillar. I think being part of that full program, because you're the one that's going to tell them every sort of step of the way what needs to change and what needs to happen in order to become that professional player.
Yeah. I think that the big thing that we reiterate for everyone who joins us at the event as well, we're not saying you basically sign up to the program, you get a scholarship and you're going to make it as a pro. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of consistency. And that was the message that we drove out on the night. And that was the message we were getting from parents and players. Everyone recognises that. But unless you know the actual pathway and the guaranteed route to making it as a pro, you could be putting all your hard work and effort in one direction, but the pathway is actually in that direction. So again, you've just said for you, it would have been ingenious for you when you were in your younger years, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Just having that advice, like I think myself as a player, I was always chasing advice, and if I wasn't selected for a team, I would still be friends with a coach that was there, just ask them, what did I not do correctly? What could I have improved on to have made you want to sign me? And just hunting that sort of all that additional information, which I think is what you're planning to give to those players by, going through the GPS program, where you can monitor how they're performing, and then you can sort of see through videos how they play, what they're performing, what they can improve on, things that top level scouts look for. So
Yeah, it's good, because that was one of the things that we looked at when we really looked in the complaints department of players and families and people like yourself who were trying to solve this mystery. And we actually sat down, and when I looked at it one night, I realised that it was so evident that there was players going on opportunities overseas, paying $10,000-15,000 for the privilege, but they weren't being prepared in any way. And for me, one, the player or the child's going to come back so upset, and we run the risk of them leaving the game because of that upset, being told you're not good enough. Mum and dad, who unfortunately there's a lot of parents do live in a little bit of a, how do we put it, like a sort of a fear-based world around the children. I'm one of them because I've got 2 daughters. You want to protect your kids, but also they then come back and go, oh, I told you so. They feel embarrassed because they've told their friends and family, or he's been to Liverpool or Bolton or Chelsea, whatever they've been for an opportunity. We told you it wasn't going to come to nothing, you'll never ever make it. And then on top of that, the person who takes the money, okay, they're filling the pockets with money and they might think that's good, but they don't realise they're ruining their reputation, because unfortunately nowadays with social media, it gets around pretty quick. They're not going to have anyone coming with them again in the future. So it doesn't add up to me. Do you understand why people still do this in Australia?
it's just the hope and the desperation. I think everyone wants to believe their kid is going to be great, and you want to give your kids everything. If you've got kids, you want to make sure they're given the correct opportunity, and they're just going to chase any opportunity that sort of comes. Which is why I think it's hard, because then they're wasting money, they're wasting time on opportunities that may not be there through, coaches that have their own programs that have set them up, but they don't have those real links, which I think is just frustrating to see that what's happened with a few of my friends with their kids, being told, just join up with the club, you pay an extra 15,000, we'll take them overseas for a trial, but who's at the trial? What are they looking for? Are they even watching? They've even had coaches that have come, top-level coaches that have come from overseas to academies here and not even paid attention to the kids, like not even watched them. They're just here for an appearance fee, which is a shame. It's a shame, but you can't blame the parents. They just want to do what's best for their kids, and everyone does. So,
just for the guys who are listening, and he did. Obviously, hasn't been to one of our events and isn't aware. So some of the pillars that we've got is match analysis, which is done by our professional coaches on the ground in the UK. So their match analysis is being done by the experts in the game. We also do a world's first unique nutrition and DNA test to ensure the fuel in the body's right. We've got pro group monthly Zoom meetings where we have the world's experts, coaches and players on our calls every month. So out of the 7 pillars, I think that the big one that we're going to really focus on just to finish off this podcast episode with Chris is around the trials. And we won't send anyone on a trial until players have gone through our program. Now, even though it's a 4-year program, anyone who joins our program who's in a little bit of the younger ages, 8s and 9s, we will keep them on the program a lot longer because it's in everyone's interest. We look to open up the trial opportunity for players who are age 16 or older. Now, we do get some older players coming on the program and we fast track them as best as we can. But again, we don't send them over if we don't believe they're ready for the opportunity. So I would have showed you, Chris, on the night, one of the player folders, and it contains about 21 pieces of information. Now, within that folder, it contains all the GPS stats, it contains the objectives. It basically showcases all the videos. It showcases a bit of everything about the player. And one of the big things that we don't do as well, we don't hide any weaknesses from clubs as well. We'll actually identify weaknesses and strengths and share it to the clubs, because in Europe, they understand players aren't going to come across complete. They'll still need work until they're 35. No one's ever a complete player. Did that, were you happy with that when you're seeing that, the way we prepare players to send them over for opportunities?
100%. And that's why I approached you afterwards, saying that, I wish this was an opportunity that I could have had, because you are, like you just said, mentioning where their weaknesses are, but you're also highlighting what their positives are, and clubs might declare, their positive is a lot better than what their negatives are. Their negatives can be trained on, and any successful person in this world will know if you've got a weakness, in terms of a negative as a weakness, you turn that weakness into a strength by focusing and training to perfect that, so to get better at it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things as well, that we're transparent, that we don't charge for the opportunity of the trial. It's part of the program. So once you're on the program, it's part of it. But we are transparent that families have to pay their own way for a flight across, and small incidentals for accommodation. But it's a free opportunity because we don't want to charge 10 to 15 for the simple reason. If we're asking families to go across more than once, the chances are, who can afford $30,000 for 2 trips to send them on a trial that might not come to anything? And that's why we said we want to protect ourselves and ensure when players go across, they're going to nail it, ideally, in the first go. And in our first year of running the programme, of 26 players who've gone across, have all been offered scholarships to go and play pro football in the UK and in Europe. Now, again, also, we said it on the night, and I'll say it again, we don't offer everyone to go to Liverpool or Chelsea or Manchester United. Some players will go to private academies, but they will play their games in national youth leagues against clubs like Coventry, Leeds United, Everton. But also, we make parents aware as well that the majority of players going across, you're not going to go across on a free ride, all expenses paid. You've got to understand, whether you live in Australia or you're living in Europe, there is things like accommodation and food that you have to account for. So we like to be transparent with everyone that this opportunity is a realistic opportunity, and it's a real opportunity. And everyone who follows the programme's got a really great chance. And to finish off, Chris, you would have seen some of the many testimonials that we had on there of players who've made it. And we showed you, we can't mention on here for various reasons, but there was a couple of players who've signed for Liverpool, for Blackburn, and for a few of the big clubs. Did that impress you to see them results?
100%. It definitely did. And even showing, even just like you said just then, like the 26 players that you gave that opportunity to, something came from that. That's 100% record. Even if it was a 50% record, even if it was a 20% record, like for a player to be given that opportunity and be able to take, you can't control whether they're going to take advantage of that opportunity when they're there. There are players that might, not be sort of, for lack of better words, like the big game kind of players where they perform on a big stage. Some players will choke, but it goes to show that, you're selecting the players that you believe are ready, and you take them over and they just do their job.
Yeah.
It's more than a lot of academies that have been around from when I was a kid can say, which is why I wish I had this opportunity when I was younger. But yeah.
So just to finish off, Chris, just to update our followers and listeners. So what are you up to with yourself in the world game? Are you doing any involvement in football at the moment, or?
Not really, not at the moment. I want to be. So I think I'm going to start looking at opportunities to try and get involved in the world game again. Just been stuck in sort of the working era at the moment. So
yeah,
but definitely looking for, I think, opportunities in the future to see what can come of it again.
No, that's amazing, Chris. We're always looking for good people to join us at Euro Football Star, and we'll have a little chat off camera when I get a chance to give you a call in the next day or two. But a big thank you, mate, from me and all the listeners and followers at Euro Football Star for joining us. Thank you for your time today, Chris.
No worries. Thanks for having me, and hopefully someone gets to learn something, or just is a little bit inspired about any info that we can sort of get out there to parents and kids.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. That's the plan, is just to get as much education out there for families and players as possible. And if we help one player today with this podcast, then I'm happy, and I sleep well tonight knowing that. So guys, a big thank you for joining us. Again, like, comment and share this podcast for me, please. and you could be winning a $50,000 scholarship. We're going to announce the winner in December 2024, and we're going to pick the winner from one of the best comments or best questions that we get on the YouTube or podcast station. So that's me, over and out from the Raymond Wood podcast, and we look forward to you joining us in our next episode next week.